After the rise of Alexander the Great, the son of Philip of Macedon, he marched out from the land of Kittim and defeated Darius, king of the Persians and Medes. From that time on, Alexander ruled in his place as the first great king over Greece. He waged many wars, conquered mighty nations, and slew kings across the earth. His armies swept to the farthest ends of the world, taking treasures and spoils from many lands. The nations trembled before him, and at last the world was silent under his power. But his heart grew proud, and he became overconfident in his own strength. After ruling for 12 years, Alexander fell ill and knew that his death was near. He called together his most trusted commanders, those who had grown up with him from his youth, and divided his kingdom among them before he died. When he passed away, each of his generals took control of a portion of the empire, and in time they all crowned themselves as kings. Their sons followed after them, ruling for many generations. And so great wickedness grew upon the earth. From this line arose a cruel and arrogant king, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king. He had once been held as a hostage in Rome, but returned to rule in the 137th year of the Greek kingdom. In those days, some unfaithful men in Israel encouraged others to abandon the law of God, saying, "Let us make an agreement with the nations around us. Ever since we separated from them, we have faced nothing but hardship." Their plan seemed good, and they went to the king asking permission to live according to the customs of the Gentiles. Antiochus agreed. Soon a gymnasium was built in Jerusalem, and young men trained there according to Greek customs. Some even removed the marks of the circumcision so that they would not appear different from the heathen. They forsook the holy covenant of the Lord, joined themselves to the Gentiles, and did all kinds of evil. When Antiochus had secured his kingdom, he sought to expand his power into Egypt, hoping to rule over both realms. He invaded with a great army, chariots, elephants, horsemen, and a vast fleet. He fought against King Ptolemy of Egypt, who fled in fear. Antiochus conquered the fortified cities of Egypt and took its riches for himself. Afterward, in the 143rd year, he returned from Egypt with a proud heart and turned his eyes toward Israel. Marching into Jerusalem with a great army, he entered the temple of God with arrogance and desecrated it. He carried away the golden altar, the lampstand of light, the sacred vessels, the table of the showbread, and all the treasures of the sanctuary. He tore down the veil, stripped the temple of its ornaments, and took even the hidden treasures. After plundering everything, he returned to his own land, speaking boastfully and leaving behind devastation and bloodshed. In Israel, there was deep mourning. The leaders and elders wept. The young men and maidens lost their strength and joy. Brides and grooms turned their wedding songs into lamentation, and sorrow covered the land. All the house of Jacob was filled with confusion and grief. 2 years later, Antiochus sent his tax collector to the cities of Judah. He came to Jerusalem with a large force and spoke deceitful words of peace. The people trusted him, but he suddenly attacked the city, slaughtering many, taking its treasures, burning its houses, and tearing down its walls. The women and children were carried off as captives, and the cattle were seized. The conquerors rebuilt the city of David with high walls and strong towers and made it their fortress. There they stationed wicked men, storing weapons and provisions and filling it with the stolen goods from Jerusalem. From this fortress, they constantly attacked the people of God. It became a snare and an enemy stronghold. Innocent blood was shed around the sanctuary, and the city was defiled. The faithful fled for their lives, leaving Jerusalem desolate and filled with strangers. Her feasts turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into shame, and her honor into disgrace. Then King Antiochus issued a decree throughout his entire kingdom that all nations should become one people and abandon their own laws. Many Gentiles and even some Israelites agreed, sacrificing to idols and profaning the Sabbath. Letters were sent to Jerusalem and throughout Judah, commanding them to forsake the law, stop offering sacrifices in the temple, and to pollute the sanctuary with idols. They were to set up altars, groves, and temples to false gods, to sacrifice swine and other unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. In every way they were to forget God's law and live as pagans, or face death. Across the land, officials enforced the king's orders. City by city, people were compelled to sacrifice to idols. Many who had abandoned God's law joined them, committing terrible acts of evil and driving the faithful into hiding. In the 145th year, on the 15th day of the month Kislev, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar of God. They built idol altars throughout Judah and burned incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. Whenever they found a copy of the law, they tore it to pieces and burned it. Anyone caught with a book of scripture or showing loyalty to God's law was put to death. Month after month, the decree was carried out with cruelty. On the 25th day of the same month, they offered sacrifices upon the altar of idols that had been built over the altar of God. Women who had circumcised their sons were executed, with their babies hung around their necks and their families slain. Yet even in such dark times, many in Israel remained steadfast. They refused to eat unclean food or break the holy covenant. Choosing death rather than defilement, they were killed for their faith. And so great wrath and suffering came upon Israel. The lost books of the Bible are now all available on a single USB golden key. Inside are 24 audiobooks with over 59 hours of audio. So if you'd like one, pause the video and grab yours from Amazon now with the link in the description. Chapter 2. In those dark days, there lived a priest named Mattathias, son of John, from the family of Joarib. He had left Jerusalem and settled in the town of Modin. He had 5 sons, John, Simon, Judas, called Maccabeus, Eleazar, and Jonathan. When Mattathias saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem, his heart broke. He cried out, "Woe is me! Why was I born to see such sorrow for my people and for the holy city? The temple has been defiled and delivered into the hands of strangers. Her sacred treasures have been stolen, her young men slain, and her children taken captive. Her beauty and honor are gone, and the Gentiles have trampled her sanctuary. What reason have we to live any longer?" He and his sons tore their clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned deeply. Not long after, the king's officers arrived in Modin to force the people to sacrifice to idols. Many Israelites gathered around, and Mattathias and his sons came too. The king's men spoke to him, saying, "You are a leader and a man of honor in this city. Come, obey the king's command as others have done. You and your sons will be counted as the king's friends and rewarded with silver, gold, and many gifts." But Mattathias answered boldly, "Even if every nation under the king obeys him and abandons the faith of their fathers, yet I and my sons will remain faithful to the covenant of our ancestors. God forbid that we should forsake his law or turn aside from his commandments." As he finished speaking, a man from Israel came forward in the sight of all to offer a pagan sacrifice upon the altar at Modin, according to the king's decree. When Mattathias saw this, righteous anger filled his spirit. Burning with zeal for God, he rushed forward and killed the man on the altar. He also struck down the king's officer who had forced the people to sacrifice, and then tore down the altar itself. Thus Mattathias acted with the same holy zeal as Phinehas had done in ancient times when he punished sin to defend the law of the Lord. Then he cried out throughout the city, "Whoever still remains faithful to the covenant, let him follow me." He and his sons fled into the mountains, leaving behind all they possessed. Many others joined them in the wilderness too, because of the persecution that had spread across the land. When the king's forces heard that a group had fled into the wilderness, they pursued them with a great army. They surrounded them and called out, "Enough of this rebellion! Come out and obey the king's command, and you will live." But the faithful replied, "We will not come out, nor will we obey the king's command to disrespect the Sabbath day." The soldiers then attacked them on the Sabbath. The people would not fight back. They would not even throw a stone or block the entrances to their hiding place. They said, "Let us die in innocence. Heaven and earth will testify that you slay us unjustly." And so they were all slaughtered that day, men, women, and children, about 1,000 souls. When Mattathias and his followers heard of this tragedy, they mourned bitterly. Then they said, "If we all refuse to fight on the Sabbath, our enemies will destroy us completely. It is better to defend our lives and our faith even on the Sabbath than to be wiped from the earth." So from that time on, they decided that if attacked on the Sabbath, they would fight back. Soon, a group of faithful warriors called the Hasidians, or the Godly Ones, joined Matthias. Strong men, devoted to the law. Many others who had fled persecution also gathered to them, strengthening their cause. Together they struck down wicked men and tore down pagan altars throughout Israel. Whenever they found uncircumcised children among the Jews, they circumcised them by force, restoring the covenant of God. Their mission prospered, and they rescued the law from the hands of the Gentiles and wicked rulers. As time passed, Mattathias grew old and knew his end was near. He called his sons together and said, "My sons, pride and wrath have grown strong, and the time of destruction is at hand. Be zealous for the law and ready to give your lives for the covenant of our fathers. Remember the deeds of our ancestors and how they were honored by God. Abraham was found faithful and counted righteous. Joseph obeyed in the time of trial and became ruler of Egypt. Phinehas showed zeal and received the covenant of everlasting priesthood. Joshua fulfilled the word of the Lord and became judge over Israel. Caleb remained steadfast and receive the land of promise. David was merciful and gained an everlasting kingdom. Elijah, zealous for God's law, was taken up to heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael were saved from the fiery furnace by faith. Daniel was preserved from the lions because of his innocence. Remember these examples and learn this truth. None who trust in God are ever overcome. Do not fear the words of sinful men, for their power is fleeting. Today they may appear mighty, but tomorrow they will vanish into dust, and their memory will perish. Be courageous, my sons, and stand firm for the law, for through it you will gain glory. He continued, Your brother Simon is a wise man. Listen to his counsel, for he shall be as a father to you. And Judas Maccabeus, your brother, is strong and brave from his youth. Let him be your leader and fight the battles of our people. Gather to yourselves all who love the law and avenge the wrongs done to Israel. Keep the commandments of God, and he will bless you. After saying this, Mattathias blessed his sons and was gathered to his fathers. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tomb of his ancestors at Modin. All Israel mourned for him with great sorrow. Chapter 3. After the death of Mattathias, his son Judas, called Maccabeus, rose to lead Israel. His brothers and all who had followed their father stood with him, fighting joyfully for the cause of their people and their faith. Judas brought great honor to Israel. He wore his armor like a giant, and his courage inspired the nation. He hunted down those who oppressed his people and burned those who troubled Israel. The ungodly trembled before him, for the Lord gave him victory after victory, defeating many kings. His fame spread far and wide, and those who were suffering or on the brink of ruin gathered to him for strength and hope. Soon Apollonius, governor of Samaria, gathered a large army of Gentiles to fight against Israel. But when Judas heard of it, he went out to meet him, defeated him in battle, and killed him. Many of Apollonius's men were slain, and Judas took his sword, which he used for the rest of his life. Then Seron, a commander of the Syrian army, heard that Judas had assembled a growing force of faithful men. Seeking to make a name for himself, Seron gathered a mighty host and marched to attack Judas, saying, I will crush those who defy the king's command. When Judas and his small band came near Bethoron, they saw the great army approaching. Some said, How can we, so few and weary from fasting, stand against so great a multitude? But Judas replied, Victory does not depend on numbers, for strength comes from heaven. They come against us in pride and wickedness to destroy us and take our families, but we fight for our lives and for the law. Therefore do not be afraid, for the Lord will overthrow them before us. As soon as he finished speaking, Judas charged into battle, and Seron's army was routed before him. They were pursued down the slopes of Bethoron to the plains, and about 800 of the enemy fell. The survivors fled to the land of the Philistines. From that day, the fame and fear of Judas spread among the surrounding nations. And when King Antiochus heard these reports, he was furious. He gathered all his forces and opened his royal treasury to pay his soldiers for a full year. But soon he found that his wealth was running out, for rebellion and famine had spread through the lands because of his harsh decrees against the ancient laws. Seeing that his finances were failing, he decided to travel east into Persia, where he hoped to collect tribute and gain more riches. Before departing, he appointed Lysias, a nobleman of royal blood, to govern from the river Euphrates to the borders of Egypt, and to raise his son Antiochus until his return. He gave Lysias half of his army, including the war elephants, and charged him to destroy Israel completely, to wipe out their strength, remove all memory of them, and settle foreigners in their land. The king then departed from Antioch, his capital, in the year 147 of the Greek kingdom, crossing the Euphrates and marching through the highlands toward Persia. Meanwhile, Lysias chose 3 of the king's trusted generals, Ptolemy, son of Dorimenes, Nicanor, and Gorgias, and sent them with 40,000 foot soldiers and 7,000 horsemen to invade Judah and destroy it. They camped at Emmaus in the plains near Judah. Hearing of their advance, merchants from nearby nations came with silver, gold, and slaves, expecting to buy the Israelites as captives. Even armies from Syria and Philistia joined the invasion. When Judas and his brothers saw that the danger had grown and that the enemies were surrounding the land, they said, "Let us fight for our people and for the sanctuary of our God. Let us rebuild the honor of our nation." They gathered the people together to prepare for battle, fasting and praying for mercy. Jerusalem lay desolate like a wilderness. No one entered or left the city. The sanctuary was defiled and held by foreigners, and the joy of Israel had vanished. No music, no worship, only silence and sorrow. So the people assembled at Mizpah, opposite Jerusalem, for that was once a place of prayer for Israel. There they fasted, put on sackcloth, scattered ashes on their heads, tore their garments, and opened the book of the law, which the Gentiles had tried to corrupt with images. They brought the priest's garments, the firstfruits, the tithes, and those who had taken Nazirite vows. Then they cried out to heaven, "O Lord, what shall we do with these holy things? Your sanctuary is trampled down, your priests are in mourning, and our enemies seek to destroy us. You know their evil plans. How can we stand unless you help us?" Then they sounded the trumpets and lifted their voices in unison. Afterward, Judas appointed commanders according to the law. Those who had just built houses, planted vineyards, become engaged, or were fearful were sent home, just as Moses had commanded. The camp then moved to the south of Emmaus, ready for battle. Judas spoke to his men, "Arm yourselves and be brave. Be ready at dawn to face the enemy who has come to destroy us and our sanctuary. It is better to die in battle than to witness the ruin of our people and our holy place. But let God's will be done in heaven and on earth." Chapter 4. Gorgias took 5,000 soldiers and 1,000 of the best horsemen and left the Syrian camp at night. He planned to surprise the camp of the Jews and strike them suddenly, guided by men from the nearby fortress who knew the way. But when Judas heard of the plan, he moved with his strongest men to attack the main Syrian camp at Emmaus while their forces were scattered. During the night, Gorgias entered the camp of the Jews but found it empty. Thinking they had fled, he searched for them in the mountains. At dawn, Judas appeared in the plain with about 3,000 men, though they lacked proper armor and weapons. When they saw the enemy camp, surrounded by experienced horsemen and fully equipped troops, fear might have taken hold of them. But Judas spoke courage into their hearts. "Do not fear their multitude or their might. Remember how our fathers were saved at the Red Sea when Pharaoh's army pursued them. Let us now cry out to heaven that the Lord may have mercy on us and remember his covenant with our fathers. May he destroy this army before us today, so that all nations will know there is one who saves Israel." Then the enemy saw the Israelites advancing and came out of their camp to meet them in battle. The men with Judas sounded the trumpets, and they charged. The Lord gave them victory. The Gentile army was broken and fled into the plains. The Israelites pursued them to Gazara, Idumea, Azotus, and Jamnia, striking down about 3,000 of the enemy. After the battle, Judas told his men, "Do not take the spoils yet, for another fight awaits us. Gorgias and his men are still in the mountains. Stand firm until we defeat them. Then you may take the plunder." Even as he spoke, Gorgias' soldiers appeared, looking down from the hills. When they saw their own camp burning and smoke rising into the sky, they knew they had been defeated. Seeing Judas's forces ready for battle below, they were filled with fear and fled into foreign lands. Then Judas and his men returned to the camp, gathered the spoils, and found great riches: gold, silver, fine cloth, and purple garments. They returned home, singing songs of thanksgiving, praising the Lord, saying, "He is good, and his mercy endures forever." That day God gave Israel a great deliverance. Those who escaped went to Lysias and told him what had happened. Lysias was stunned and deeply discouraged, for the king's command had failed, and Israel stood strong. The following year, Lysias gathered a new army, 60,000 foot soldiers and 5,000 horsemen, and marched into Idumea to subdue Judah. Judas met him with 10,000 men. Seeing the vast enemy host, Judas prayed, "Blessed are you, O Savior of Israel, who delivered Goliath into the hand of your servant David, and the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan the son of Saul and his armor-bearer. Deliver this army to the hands of your people. Take away their courage and strike them down. Let all who know your name give thanks and praise you." The battle began, and the Lord gave victory to Israel. About 5,000 of Lysias' soldiers were slain before them. Seeing his army routed, and the bravery of Judas's men who were ready to live or die for their faith, Lysias retreated to Antioch. There he gathered mercenaries and rebuilt his army, planning to return with greater strength. Then Judas and his brothers said, "Now that our enemies are defeated, let us go up and cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary." The people assembled and went up to Mount Zion. When they entered the temple, they saw it desolate, the altar profaned, the gates burned, shrubs growing in the courtyards like a forest, and the priests' chambers torn down. They tore their clothes, threw ashes on their heads, and fell on their faces, crying out to heaven and sounding the trumpets in lament. Judas appointed men to keep watch against the fortress garrison until the sanctuary was cleansed. He chose priests of good character who loved the law, and they cleansed the temple, removing the defiled stones to an unclean place. When they discussed what to do with the defiled altar of burnt offerings, they decided to take it down, for it had been dishonored by the Gentiles. They placed the stones aside on the Temple Mount to await the word of a prophet about what should be done with them. Then they built a new altar of uncut stones according to the law, and repaired the sanctuary and the inner parts of the temple, consecrating the courts once again. On the 25th day of the 9th month, the month of Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose early and offered sacrifice on the new altar, following the law. On the very day that the Gentiles had defiled it, they now rededicated it with songs and rejoicing. They celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days, offering burnt offerings with gladness and sacrifices of thanksgiving. They adorned the front of the temple with crowns of gold and shields, rebuilt the gates and chambers, and set doors upon them. Great joy filled the people, for the shame brought by the Gentiles had been removed. Judas and his brothers, together with all Israel, decreed that this festival should be kept each year for 8 days, beginning on the 25th of Kislev, in joy and gladness. At that time, they also rebuilt the walls of Mount Zion, setting up high towers to protect it from future desecration. They stationed guards there and fortified the town of Bethser as a stronghold, so the people would have defense against the attacks from Idumea. Chapter 5. When the surrounding nations heard that Judas and his men had rebuilt the altar and restored the temple, anger burned in their hearts. They could not bear to see Israel rise again, and so they conspired together to destroy the people of Jacob once and for all. Bands of enemies attacked Jewish settlements, murdering and plundering wherever they went. Judas rose up to meet them. He marched against the people of Esau in Idumea, who had surrounded the town of Gael, and he struck them down with great force. Next, he turned his attention to the people of Baan, who had ambushed Israelites along the roads. Judas surrounded their towers, laid siege to them, and burned them with fire, destroying every one of those who had caused harm to God's people. Afterward, he marched against the Ammonites, led by their commander Timotheus. They had gathered a great host, but Judas fought many battles against them until they were completely defeated. Meanwhile, the Gentiles in Gilead united to destroy the Jews living in their region. The Israelites there fled to the fortress of Dathamah and sent desperate letters to Judas and his brothers. The nations around us have gathered to destroy us. Timotheus leads them, and they plan to storm the fortress tomorrow. Many of our brethren in Tob have already been slain, their wives and children carried off into captivity, and about 1,000 of our people killed. Even as these letters were read, other messengers arrived from Galilee. Their clothes were torn, and they cried out, "The Gentiles from Ptolemais, Tyre, Sidon, and all Galilee have joined together to wipe us out." When Judas heard these cries, he called a great assembly of the people to decide how to help their brethren under attack. He said to his brother Simon, "Take men with you and deliver our people in Galilee, while Jonathan and I go to help those in Gilead." He left behind Joseph, son of Zacharias, and Azarias to guard Judea, warning them, "Keep the land safe, but do not go to war until we return." Simon took 3,000 men and marched north into Galilee. Judas took 8,000 into Gilead. Simon fought many battles against the Gentiles of Galilee. He pursued them to the gates of Ptolemais, where about 3,000 were slain. He gathered the surviving Jews of the region along with their families and possessions and led them safely back to Judea, rejoicing. At the same time, Judas and Jonathan crossed the Jordan and journeyed for 3 days through the wilderness. They met peaceably with the Nabateans, who told them that many Jews were trapped in fortified cities. Tomorrow, they said, their enemies will attack and destroy them all in one day. At once, Judas turned his army toward Bosra. He attacked at dawn, captured the city, slew all the men, took the spoils, and burned it with fire. By night, he marched onward and came near the fortress where the Jews were besieged. At sunrise, they saw a vast army approaching with ladders and siege engines, ready to storm the walls. The cries of the people and the sound of trumpets rose to heaven. Judas said to his men, "This day we fight for our brothers." Dividing his forces into 3 companies, he sounded the trumpets and charged. When Timotheus's army realized it was Judas Maccabeus himself, they panicked and fled. The Israelites struck them down with great slaughter. About 8,000 men fell that day. Judas then turned aside to Masphah, captured it, slew all the men, took the spoils, and burned it with fire. From there, he marched on and captured Casphon, Maked, Bosor, and other strong cities of Gilead. But Timotheus was not finished. He gathered a new army and encamped beyond the brook near Revolt. Judas sent scouts who returned saying, "They have gathered a great host of Gentiles, and even hired Arabians to join them." Timotheus told his captains, "If Judas crosses the brook first, we will lose, for the Lord is with him. But if he camps on this side, then we shall prevail." When Judas reached the stream, he ordered his scribes to stay behind and make sure no one lingered in the camp. All were to join the battle. Then he crossed the brook first, followed by all his men. The enemy broke before them. Many fled into the temple at Carnaim for refuge, but Judas captured the city and burned the temple, destroying all who were inside. None could stand before him. Then Judas gathered all the Israelites from Gilead, men, women, and children with their belongings, and began the long journey home. When they reached the city of Ephron, a great and fortified place blocking their route, the people of the city closed their gates and refused to let them pass. Judas sent peaceful messengers saying, "Let us pass through your land to reach our home. We will harm no one and only pass through on foot." But they would not open the gates. So Judas ordered his men to encamp where they stood. All day and night they fought against the city until at last it was taken. Every man inside was slain, the city torn down, and the spoils taken. They then marched over the bodies of their enemies and continued their journey. Crossing the Jordan, they entered the great plain before Bethshan. Judas gathered all the stragglers, encouraging them along the way until they safely reached Judea. They went up to Mount Zion in joy and thanksgiving, offering sacrifices to the Lord, for not one of them had perished on the journey. While Judas and Jonathan were in Gilead and Simon in Galilee, Joseph and Azarias, the captains left in Judea, heard of their victories and said proudly, "Let us make a name for ourselves and fight the nations around us." But they ignored Judas's command and marched to Jamnia. There Gorgias came out against them and defeated them badly. About 2,000 Israelites were slain that day. This disaster came upon them because they had acted without obedience or guidance, seeking glory for themselves. They were not of the same faithful line through whom God had delivered Israel. Meanwhile, Judas and his brothers grew in fame. He marched south and fought against the people of Esau in the land near Hebron. He captured the city, destroyed its towers, and burned its fortresses. From there, he passed through the land of the Philistines and into Samaria. But some priests, eager to prove their courage, went out to battle rashly and were killed. Judas pressed on to the city of Azotus, where he tore down the pagan altars, burned their carved idols, and plundered their cities. Then he and his men returned safely to Judea, giving thanks to the Lord for their victories. Chapter 6. Around this time, King Antiochus was traveling through the highlands of Persia when he heard reports about the city of Elymais, a place famed for its wealth of gold and silver. There, it was said, stood a magnificent temple filled with golden coverings, shields, and armor that had once belonged to Alexander the Great, the Macedonian conqueror who ruled before him. Greedy for treasure, Antiochus marched toward the city, planning to plunder it. But the people of Elymais learned of his approach, armed themselves, and rose up in defense. Antiochus was driven back in shame and fled, his pride wounded. Heavy-hearted, he returned to Babylon in deep distress. Not long after, messengers reached him with troubling news. His armies sent into Judea had been utterly defeated. Lysias, whom he had trusted with a great host, had been routed by the Jews who'd grown strong enough through the weapons and treasures they had captured in battle. The king's abomination on the altar in Jerusalem had been torn down, and the temple restored with high walls and renewed strength. Even the fortress at Beth-zur had been rebuilt. When Antiochus heard these things, his heart failed him. He fell sick with grief, realizing that his plans had come to nothing. Day after day, his sorrow deepened until he knew he was near death. Summoning his closest friends, he confessed, "Sleep has left me, and my heart is full of anguish. I see now the misery I have brought upon myself. Once I was powerful and honored, but now I remember the evil I did in Jerusalem. For this reason, these troubles have come upon me. I am dying in great grief, far from home." Then he called for Philip, one of his trusted companions, and handed him the crown, robe, and signet ring. He charged him to raise up his young son Antiochus and prepare him to rule. Soon after, in the 149th year, King Antiochus died in a foreign land. When Lysias learned of the king's death, he appointed the young Antiochus as ruler, calling him Eupator, meaning of noble father. Meanwhile, the garrison stationed in the fortress at Jerusalem continued to harass the Israelites near the sanctuary, and Judas decided to end this threat once and for all. He gathered the people and laid siege to the fortress in the 150th year, setting up siege ramps and engines of war. But some of the besieged escaped and joined with certain traitorous Israelites who went to the young king. They said, "How long will you delay before avenging us? We've always served your father and obeyed his commands, yet now our own countrymen have turned against us. They have slain us, stolen our lands, and besieged us in Jerusalem. If you do not act soon, they will grow even stronger, and you will lose control of the region." Angered, the young king gathered his advisors, captains, and horsemen. He called mercenaries from distant lands and islands until his army numbered 100,000 infantry, 20,000 horsemen, and 32 trained war elephants. Marching through Idumea, the king laid siege to Beth-zur. The defenders fought bravely, setting fire to the siege engines, and the battle raged for many days. Judas then moved his camp from the fortress and took position directly across from the royal army. At dawn, the king advanced in battle formation. The sun gleamed off his soldiers' shields of gold and bronze, and the mountains shone as though lit with fire. The ground trembled beneath the sound of marching men, clashing armor, and the deep trumpeting of elephants. Each elephant carried a wooden tower strapped to its back, guarded by 32 warriors and guided by an Indian driver. Around them stood ranks of heavily armored men and horsemen ready to charge. When the king's army stretched across the hills and valleys, its sight and sound filled all who beheld it with dread. Judas and his men drew near, and the battle began. 600 of the king's men fell in the first clash. Among the Israelites was a brave warrior named Eleazar. Seeing one of the elephants covered in royal armor and towering above the rest, he believed the king must be upon it. Desiring to win glory and deliver his people, he charged into the thick of the fight, striking right and left until he reached the great beast. Crawling beneath it, he thrust his spear upward into its belly and killed it. The elephant fell and crushed him beneath its weight. And there Eleazar died. Yet the battle raged on. Seeing the might of the enemy forces, the Israelites withdrew toward Jerusalem. The king then turned and besieged the holy city itself. The people of Bethser, weakened by famine because it was a sabbatical year when the land lay at rest, surrendered. The king accepted their peace, took the city, and stationed a garrison there. Then he set his engines and catapults against the walls of the temple in Jerusalem, hurling stones, fire, and darts. Judas's men fought back with their own engines, and the siege dragged on for a long time. But famine began to grip those inside the city. Supplies were nearly gone, for the land had produced nothing that year, and the remaining provisions had already been consumed by those who had fled to Jerusalem earlier. At last, only a few defenders remained, scattered and starving. About that time, news reached Lysias that Philip, the man appointed by Antiochus to guide the young king, had returned from Persia and was trying to seize control of the kingdom. Realizing their army was weakening, their supplies nearly exhausted, and the kingdom itself in danger, Lysias urged the king and his captains to make peace. He said, "We grow weaker every day. Our provisions are nearly gone, and the siege drags on. Let us make peace with these men and allow them to live according to their own laws, for it was our attempt to abolish those laws that caused this war." The young king agreed. Peace envoys were sent, and the Jews accepted. Oaths were made, and the king and his princes swore to uphold the covenant. The defenders opened the gates of the fortress, and the king entered Mount Zion. But when he saw how strong and fortified the place was, he broke his oath and ordered the walls to be torn down. Then in haste he departed and returned to Antioch, where he found that Philip had already seized control of the city. A fierce battle followed, and the young king retook Antioch by force. Chapter 7. In the 151st year, Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, escaped from Rome and sailed east with only a small band of men. He landed at a coastal city and there seized the throne of his fathers. When he entered the royal palace at Antioch, his soldiers captured the young Antiochus Eupator and his guardian Lysias to bring them before him. But Demetrius, filled with hatred, said coldly, "I will not see their faces." And at his command, both were put to death. Now that Demetrius was king, many of the wicked men of Israel came to him, led by Alcimus, who longed to become high priest. They accused Judas and his followers, saying, "Judas and his brothers have slain your friends and driven us from our lands. Send someone you trust to see the havoc he has caused and punish him and all who support him." Demetrius appointed Bacchides, a powerful and loyal officer who ruled west of the Euphrates, and sent him with Alcimus, whom he made high priest, commanding him to take vengeance on the Jews. Maccabees and Alcimus entered Judea with a strong army. They sent messengers to Judas and his brothers with peaceful words, pretending friendship. But Judas and his men did not believe them. They saw the size of their army and recognized that they were lying. Nevertheless, a group of scribes and teachers came to meet Alcimus and Maccabees, seeking justice and peace. Among them were the Hasidians, devout men who said, "A priest of the line of Aaron has come. Surely he means no harm." Alcimus spoke kindly to them and swore an oath, saying, "We will harm neither you nor your friends." Trusting him, 60 of the Hasidians came forward, but he betrayed them, slaughtering all 60 in a single day. Terror spread among the people. They said, "There is no truth or justice in them, since they have broken their oath." Afterward, Maccabees moved his camp to Beseth. He captured many of the men who had once followed Judas but then turned against him and slew them, casting their bodies into a great pit. Then he left the land under Alcimus's command and returned to the king. Alcimus, now claiming the high priesthood, gathered around him all the corrupt men of Israel. Together they caused great harm, doing more evil among their own people than even the Gentiles had done. When Judas saw the devastation they had brought upon Israel, he rose up and struck back, punishing the traitors who had joined the enemy. Afterward, none dared openly oppose him. But Alcimus, seeing that Judas was gaining strength, returned to Demetrius and spoke evil of him once again. So the king sent Nicanor, one of his most honored princes and a man who hated Israel, commanding him to destroy Judas and his followers. Nicanor marched into Judea with a large army and sent word to Judas, pretending friendship. "Let there be no battle between us," he said. "I will come with a few men to speak with you in peace." He came and greeted Judas warmly, but it was all deceit, for his men planned to seize him by force. When Judas learned of the treachery, he broke off all contact, refusing to meet Nicanor again. Nicanor, enraged that his plan had failed, marched out to fight. Near Caphasalama, his army met Judas's forces, and 5,000 of Nicanor's men fell in battle. The rest fled into the city of David. Soon after, Nicanor went up to Mount Zion. Some of the priests and elders came out to greet him peacefully and show him the sacrifices that were being offered for the king. But he mocked and swore at them, saying, "If Judas and his army are not delivered into my hands, I will return and burn this temple to the ground." Then he stormed away in fury. The priests entered the temple and fell before the altar, weeping and praying, "O Lord, you chose this house to bear your name, to be a place of prayer for your people. Avenge us against this blasphemer and his army." Meanwhile, Nicanor camped at Beth-horon, joined by forces from Syria. Judas encamped at Adasa with 3,000 men. There he prayed, saying, "O Lord, when the Assyrians blasphemed, you sent your angel who struck down 185,000. Do the same for us now. Destroy this host, that all may know you defend your holy place." On the 13th day of the month Adar, the two armies met in battle. The Lord gave victory to Israel. Nicanor's army was crushed, and Nicanor himself was the first to fall. Seeing their commander slain, the enemy threw down their weapons and fled. The men of Judah pursued them for a full day's journey, from Adasa to Gazara, sounding the trumpets of triumph. The people of the nearby towns came out and joined the pursuit, cutting off the fleeing soldiers until none remained. Then Judas's men took the spoils of the battle, and as a sign of victory, they cut off Nicanor's head and right hand, the very hand he had raised in pride against the temple, and brought them to Jerusalem. they hung them up for all to see, facing the city of God. The people rejoiced with great gladness, and that day was declared a festival of victory. It was decreed that the 13th day of Adar should be kept every year as a day of joy and thanksgiving. And so the land of Judah had rest for a little while. Chapter 8. In those days, Judas Maccabeus heard of the fame of the Romans, a nation known for its courage, discipline, and fairness toward those who allied with them. It was said that they welcomed all peoples who sought friendship, and that they were mighty in battle, yet merciful to their allies. Stories of their victories spread far and wide. They had defeated the Galatians, bringing them under tribute, and conquered the distant lands of Spain, rich with gold and silver mines. Though far from their own country, they had subdued these regions through patience, wisdom, and careful strategy. Kings from the ends of the earth had come against them, yet the Romans had humbled them all, forcing many to pay yearly tribute. They had overcome Philip and Perseus, kings of the Western Isles, and had even defeated Antiochus the Great, the mighty king of Asia, who had marched against them with a vast army. The Romans struck him down, captured him alive, and forced him to make peace. They took from him the rich lands of India, Media, and Lydia, giving them to King Eumenes, their ally. Judas also heard how the Greeks had once plotted to destroy Rome, but the Romans, learning of it, sent one general against them. That commander crushed the enemy, captured their women and children, destroyed their strongholds, and reduced them to servitude, as they remain to this day. Every kingdom that resisted them had been subdued, and every island brought under their rule. And yet for all their power, none among them set themselves above their brethren. Instead, they governed through a senate, 320 men who met daily to consider the welfare of the people and keep order in the realm. They chose one man each year to act as leader and commander over all, and the people obeyed him without jealousy or division. When Judas heard of such justice and strength, he decided that an alliance with Rome could bring safety and peace to Israel. He appointed Eupolemus, son of John, and Jason, son of Eleazar, to go as ambassadors to Rome and seek friendship and protection. The oppression of the Greek kings weighed heavily on the Jews, and Judas hoped this new alliance would ease their burden. The envoys set out on their long journey and came at last to Rome, where they entered the Senate and spoke, saying, "Judas Maccabeus, with his brothers and the people of the Jews, send greetings to the Roman Senate. We come to make a covenant of peace and friendship, that we may be registered among your allies." The proposal pleased the Romans greatly, and they agreed. They wrote an agreement on tablets of bronze and sent a copy to Jerusalem as a memorial of their covenant. "May good success be to the Romans and to the people of the Jews by sea and by land forever. Let sword and enemy be far from them. If war comes first upon the Romans or any of their allies throughout their dominion, the Jews shall assist them as the time requires with all their heart. They shall not give aid or supplies to the enemies of Rome, no food, weapons, money, or ships. They shall keep this covenant faithfully without payment. Likewise, if war comes first upon the Jews, the Romans shall stand beside them with all their heart, giving no help or supply to their enemies. According to these terms, the Romans and the Jews make this covenant of friendship and alliance. If at any time either side desires to add or change anything, they may do so, and whatever is decided shall be binding." The Senate also wrote to King Demetrius, saying, "Why have you made your yoke heavy upon our friends and allies, the people of the Jews? If they complain to us again about your oppression, we will defend them and make war upon you by sea and by land. Thus the Jews were counted among the friends of Rome, a powerful ally in the days ahead. Chapter 9. When King Demetrius heard that Nicanor and his army had been defeated and slain, he was filled with fury. Determined to crush the Jews once and for all, he sent Bacchides and Alcimus back into Judea, this time with the strongest forces of his realm. They marched by way of Galgala and camped before Masaloth in Arbela. After taking the city, they slew many of its inhabitants. In the first month of the 152nd year, they advanced and encamped before Jerusalem, then moved to Berea with 20,000 infantry and 2,000 horsemen. Meanwhile, Judas Maccabeus had encamped at Eleasa with 3,000 of his chosen men. But when his soldiers saw the vast size of the enemy army, fear spread through the camp, and most deserted during the night, until only 800 faithful men remained. Seeing that his numbers had dwindled, Judas was grieved, but unshaken. He said to those who remained, "Let us go out and face our enemies. Perhaps the Lord will grant us victory." They urged him to withdraw, saying, "We are too few. Let us live to fight another day and gather our brethren again." Judas replied, "God forbid that I should flee from battle. If our time has come, let us die bravely for our brothers and not stain our honor." At dawn, Bacchides arrayed his army. His horsemen were divided into 2 wings, slingers and archers in front, and the strongest warriors at their head. Bacchides himself commanded the right wing. Trumpets sounded on both sides, and the ground trembled beneath the clash of armies. Judas, seeing that Bacchides and his mightiest troops were on the right, charged fiercely with his bravest men. They struck down the enemy's right wing and pursued them to Mount Azotus. But the left wing of Bacchides' army circled around and attacked Judas from behind. The battle raged from morning until evening, and many fell on both sides. At last, Judas himself was slain. His men fled, broken and weeping. His brothers, Jonathan and Simon, recovered his body and buried him in their father's tomb at Modin. All Israel mourned deeply for him, saying, "How has the mighty hero fallen, the one who delivered Israel?" Judas had performed countless brave deeds, and his courage had given Israel freedom for a time. But with his death, darkness returned. The wicked rose again in power throughout Israel. Lawlessness spread, and famine gripped the land. Many, out of desperation, joined the ungodly. Bacchides appointed corrupt men as rulers over the country, hunting down all who had supported Judas. They were captured, tortured, and killed. Then Judas's followers gathered and said to his brother, "Since your brother Judas has died, we have no leader like him to stand against our enemies. Therefore we choose you, Jonathan, to be our ruler and captain, that you may fight for our people." Jonathan accepted the charge and rose in his brother's place. But when Bacchides learned of this, he sought to kill him. Jonathan and his brother Simon fled with their companions into the wilderness of Tekoa and camped beside the pool of Asphar. Bacchides pursued them with his whole army, even on the Sabbath. Jonathan sent his brother John with a company to their Nabatean allies, asking them to safeguard their supplies. But the sons of Jambri from Medaba ambushed John, killed him, and carried off all the goods. Later, Jonathan and Simon heard that the sons of Jambri were celebrating a grand wedding. The bride, the daughter of a great Canaanite prince, was being escorted from Nadabatha with music, drums, and a great procession. Remembering their slain brother, the 2 brothers lay in ambush in the mountains. As the wedding party passed by, they attacked suddenly, killing many of the men, and the rest fled in terror. The marriage feast turned to mourning, the music to lamentation. Thus Jonathan and Simon avenged their brother's blood. Soon after, Maccabees heard of this and marched to the banks of the Jordan with a great army on the Sabbath day. Jonathan said to his men, "We must fight for our lives today. We are surrounded behind us and before us, and the river and marshes block our escape. Cry out to heaven for deliverance." They joined battle fiercely. Jonathan tried to strike Maccabees himself, but Maccabees drew back. Jonathan and his men leapt into the Jordan, swimming across to the other side, while about 1,000 of Maccabees' men were slain that day. Maccabees then returned to Jerusalem and strengthened the fortified cities of Judea, building high walls, gates, and bars, placing garrisons in each, and holding the sons of the leading families as hostages within the citadel in Jerusalem. In the second month of the 153rd year, Alcimus ordered the walls of the inner temple court to be torn down, destroying even the sacred works built by the prophets. But as he began, the Lord struck him with a sudden paralysis. His mouth was stopped. He could not speak nor give any order. Thus Alcimus died in torment, and his plans perished with him. When Maccabees heard of Alcimus's death, he returned to the king, and the land of Judea had peace for 2 years. But the ungodly men conspired again, saying, "Jonathan and his followers live in peace and have grown careless. Let us bring Maccabees back to capture them all in one night." They sent word to him secretly, but Jonathan discovered the plot. He seized about 50 of the conspirators and put them to death. Then Jonathan and Simon withdrew to Beth-Basai, a fortress in the wilderness, and strengthened it. When Maccabees learned of this, he gathered his army and laid siege to the fortress, which lasted many days. Jonathan left Simon in command of the city and went out with a small company, attacking Maccabees' allies in their tents and killing many, including Odonaces and his brothers. While he fought in the field, Simon led a sally from the fortress, burning the siege engines and fighting bravely. Maccabees' army was thrown into confusion, suffering great losses, and his plans failed. Furious, Maccabees turned on the treacherous men who had urged him into the campaign. He killed many of them in rage and resolved to withdraw from Judea. When Jonathan learned of this, he sent envoys to make peace. Maccabees accepted, swearing that he would never again harm him or enter his borders. He released all the prisoners he had taken and returned to his own land. So at last the sword ceased in Israel. Jonathan settled at Michmash, took up the rule of the people, and purged the land of the ungodly. Chapter 10. In the year 160, Alexander, son of Antiochus Epiphanes, seized Ptolemais and was welcomed by its people. So he began to reign there. When King Demetrius heard it, he gathered a great army to fight him. Wanting the Jews on his side, Demetrius sent gracious letters to Jonathan, granting him the right to raise an army and equip it, and ordering the citadel to release the Jewish hostages. Jonathan read the letters publicly in Jerusalem. The garrison in the tower grew afraid and handed the hostages over, and Jonathan returned them to their families. Jonathan then settled in Jerusalem, repairing and strengthening the city and Mount Zion with squared stones. The foreign garrisons Maccabees had set up fled to their own lands, though some lawless men still held Bethsur as their refuge. Hearing how Demetrius courted Jonathan, and learning of Jonathan's courage and the hardships he and his brothers had endured, Alexander said, "Such a man we must befriend." He wrote to Jonathan, "We have heard of your strength. We appoint you high priest of your nation and friend of the king," sending him a purple robe and a golden crown and asking his alliance. So at the Feast of Tabernacles, in the year 160, Jonathan put on the sacred high priestly garments, raised forces, and supplied a great quantity of armor. When Demetrius heard this, he regretted being outmaneuvered. "Alexander has won their friendship before us. I will also write to them and promise honors." He sent a long decree, freeing the Jews from many taxes, releasing captives, granting festival immunities around Sabbaths and feast days, enrolling 30,000 Jews in royal service, joining 3 Samaritan districts to Judea under the high priest's authority, giving Ptolemaeus' revenues to the sanctuary, assigning silver from royal accounts for temple needs and Jerusalem's walls, and granting asylum to those seeking refuge at the temple. But the people remembered the great evils Demetrius had done to Israel and did not trust him. They preferred Alexander, who had first made true peace with them, and they kept faith with him. Soon after, Alexander mustered his forces and faced Demetrius in battle. Demetrius' army broke and fled. Alexander pursued until sunset, and that day Demetrius was slain. Afterward, Alexander sought a stronger throne by alliance with Ptolemy, king of Egypt. He wrote, "I have regained the kingdom and overthrown Demetrius. Let us make a covenant. Give me your daughter as wife, and I will be your son-in-law." Ptolemy agreed, and in the year 162, he came to Ptolemaeus with his daughter Cleopatra. Alexander met him there, married her with royal splendor, and confirmed the alliance. Alexander then summoned Jonathan to Ptolemaeus. Jonathan came honorably, bearing gifts of silver and gold. Some wicked men of Israel tried to accuse him, but the king refused them. Instead, he had Jonathan robed in purple, seated him in honor, and made him a duke and sharer in royal authority. Jonathan returned to Jerusalem in peace and joy. In the year 165, Demetrius the king's son came from Crete to claim his father's throne. Alexander, alarmed, returned to Antioch. Demetrius appointed Apollonius governor of Coel Syria. Apollonius gathered a large force, camped at Jamnia, and sent Jonathan a taunting challenge. "You boast from the hills. Come down to the plain and fight. There is no escape from my horsemen." Jonathan chose 10,000 men and marched out. Simon met him to help. They first moved against Joppa. The city shut its gates because Apollonius held a garrison there, but Jonathan besieged it until, in fear, they opened the gates and he took the city. Hearing this, Apollonius advanced with 3,000 horsemen and many foot soldiers, moving like a traveler to lure Jonathan into the plains near Azotus. He had also hidden 1,000 horsemen in ambush. The fight raged all day. Darts rained from front and rear. Jonathan's men held their ground until the enemy horses were spent. Then Simon led his force against the foot soldiers and routed them. The scattered cavalry fled into Azotus and into the temple of Dagon for refuge. Jonathan set fire to Azotus and the surrounding towns, seized the spoils, and burnt the temple of Dagon with those who had fled inside. Nearly 8,000 were killed by fire and sword. From there, Jonathan moved to Ascalon, where the people came out in splendor to greet him. He then returned to Jerusalem with abundant spoils. When Alexander heard of these victories, he honored Jonathan even more, sending him a golden buckle, a sign reserved for the king's relatives, and granting him Ekron with its borders as a possession. Chapter 11. The king of Egypt, Ptolemy, raised an army as countless as the sand, and a great fleet. Though he came peacefully as Alexander's father-in-law, his true plan was to seize Alexander's kingdom for himself. As he passed through the coastal cities, the towns opened their gates by Alexander's order. Yet Ptolemy quietly stationed garrisons in each place. Near Azotus, locals showed him the burned temple of Dagon, the ruined suburbs, and the heaps of bodies from Jonathan's victory, hoping to turn the king against Jonathan. Ptolemy said nothing. Jonathan met Ptolemy in state at Joppa. They exchanged greetings and lodged together. Jonathan escorted the king as far as the Eleutherus River, then returned to Jerusalem. By now, Ptolemy controlled the coast and began plotting against Alexander. He secretly sent to Demetrius, "Let us make a league. I will take back my daughter from Alexander and give her to you, and you shall reign in your father's kingdom." Claiming Alexander had tried to kill him, he slandered him, withdrew his daughter, and publicly broke with him. Ptolemy entered Antioch and set 2 crowns on his head, the crowns of Asia and Egypt. Alexander, who was then in Cilicia suppressing revolt, rushed to fight him, but Ptolemy marched out with a powerful host and put him to flight. Alexander fled to Arabia for refuge, where Zabdiel the Arabian beheaded him and sent the head to Ptolemy. 3 days later, Ptolemy himself died, and garrisons across the land fell into bloody quarrels. Thus, Demetrius II began to reign in the year 167. At that time, Jonathan gathered the men of Judea to capture the tower in Jerusalem, building many siege engines. Lawless men went to Demetrius and accused Jonathan of besieging the fortress, and the king hurried to Ptolemais and ordered Jonathan to come at once and stop the siege. Jonathan kept the siege in place, chose elders and priests to accompany him, took silver, gold, and other gifts, and went to meet the king. Despite further accusations, Demetrius received him graciously, confirmed him as high priest, restored his honors, and set him among his chief friends. Jonathan asked that Judea and the 3 districts in Samaria be freed from tribute, pledging 300 talents. Demetrius agreed and wrote official letters confirming Judea's borders, remitting tithes, customs, salt, and crown tax, releasing past dues, and ordering the decree to be copied and set up conspicuously on the Holy Mount. Seeing the land quiet, Demetrius dismissed most of his native forces and kept only foreign mercenaries from the islands, so the soldiers of his fathers began to hate him. Then Tryphon, a former supporter of Alexander, seeing the army's discontent, went to Similcu the Arabian, who was raising young Antiochus, Alexander's son. Tryphon pressed him to release the boy so that he might reign in his father's stead, and bided his time. Meanwhile, Jonathan asked Demetrius to expel the garrisons from the citadel and other fortresses that warred against Israel. Demetrius promised even greater favors if Jonathan would send soldiers to help him. Jonathan sent 3,000 to Antioch. There, the citizens rose in revolt, about 120,000 against the king. Demetrius fled into the palace courts and called on the Jews. Jonathan's men spread through the city, slew about 100,000, burned sections of the city, took much spoil, and rescued the king. Terrified, the citizens begged for peace, laid down their arms, and the Jews returned to Jerusalem, honored and laden with goods. Yet Demetrius soon broke faith, turning cold toward Jonathan and giving him trouble instead of reward. At this, Tryphon returned with a young Antiochus VI, crowned him, and all the soldiers whom Demetrius had dismissed rallied to the boy. They defeated Demetrius, and Tryphon seized Antioch. Young Antiochus wrote to Jonathan, confirming him as high priest, setting him over 4 provinces, and naming him the king's friend. He sent him many gifts, and Simon, Jonathan's brother, was made commander from the ladder of Tyre down to Egypt's border. Jonathan then marched further, gathering Syrian forces to him. Ascalon received him with honor. Gaza shut its gates, so he besieged it, burned the suburbs, seized spoil, then made peace and took hostages to Jerusalem before moving on toward Damascus. When Jonathan heard that Demetrius's princes had gathered at Kadesh in Galilee with a great army to drive him out, he went to meet them, leaving Simon in the country. Simon besieged Beth-sur for a long time. They sought peace, he granted it, expelled them, took the city, and set a garrison. Jonathan camped by the waters of Gennesaret, then moved at dawn to the plain of Nasor. The enemy, who had laid ambushes in the hills, came out to face him. When the hidden troops sprang their trap and joined battle, Jonathan's men fled until only 2 captains, Mattathias, son of Absalom, and Judas, son of Calphi, remained. Jonathan tore his garments, cast earth on his head, prayed, turned back to the fight, and routed the enemy. Seeing this, his men returned, pursued the foe to Kadesh and into their camp, and struck down about 3,000 that day. Afterward, Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. Chapter 12. When Jonathan saw that the time was right, he chose trusted men and sent them to Rome to renew the alliance that the Jews had made long ago. He also sent letters to the Spartans and to other nations for the same purpose. His envoys came before the Roman Senate and said, "Jonathan, the high priest, and the people of the Jews, send us to renew the former friendship and league you made with them." The Romans welcomed them and gave them letters of safe conduct, instructing all governors and rulers to allow the Jewish envoys to travel safely through their lands. Jonathan also wrote to the Spartans, saying, "Jonathan, the high priest, with the elders, priests, and the rest of the Jewish people, send greetings to their brothers, the Spartans. In times past, King Darius wrote to our forefather Onias, the high priest, declaring that the Spartans and Jews are brothers, descended from Abraham. Onias received his ambassador with honor, and letters were exchanged confirming this friendship. Although we do not depend on such things, for we have the Holy Scriptures to comfort and guide us, we now send to renew our bond of brotherhood and friendship, lest time make us strangers to one another. We remember you in our sacrifices and prayers, rejoicing in your honor. As for us, we have faced many wars and trials, surrounded by hostile kings, yet we did not burden you or our other allies. For we have help from heaven, and our enemies have been subdued before us. For this cause, we have sent Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, to renew our alliance with Rome and with you. Please send us your reply." The Spartans, in turn, wrote back, "Arius, king of the Spartans, to Onias the high priest, greetings. It is written that the Spartans and Jews are brothers, both descended from Abraham. Now that we have learned this, it pleases us to write to you concerning your welfare. Know that your possessions are ours, and ours are yours. We have sent our ambassadors to confirm this message." Not long after this, Jonathan heard that Demetrius's generals were marching against him with a larger army than before. He went out to meet them in the land of Amathus and prevented them from invading Judea. Spies reported that the enemy planned a night attack, so Jonathan ordered his men to stay armed and on guard all night, posting sentinels around the camp. When the enemy learned that Jonathan was ready, they lost courage and set fires throughout their camp, pretending to stay the night, but secretly retreating. At dawn, Jonathan saw their fires still burning and realized they had fled across the river Eleutherus. He pursued, but could not overtake them. Turning instead against the Arabians, called Zabadeans, he defeated them and took much spoil, then marched on through Damascus and the surrounding lands. Meanwhile, Simon, his brother, went through the coastland, taking Ascalon and the nearby strongholds. He then turned to Joppa and captured it, setting a garrison there because its people had planned to hand it over to Demetrius's allies. When Jonathan returned to Jerusalem, he gathered the elders to discuss strengthening Judea's defenses, raising the city walls, building new fortresses, and constructing a greater barrier between the citadel and the city so that no one could trade or enter from the tower. The people worked together to rebuild Jerusalem, repairing the eastern wall that had fallen and restoring the section called Caphanatha. Simon also fortified the town of Adida in the lowlands with gates and bars. But while Judea grew stronger, Tryphon plotted to seize the kingdom of Asia for himself. He planned to kill the young king Antiochus and take his crown, but he feared Jonathan, who might oppose him. So he schemed to capture him by deceit. Tryphon came to Bethshan, and Jonathan marched out to meet him with 40,000 seasoned soldiers. Seeing such a great force, Tryphon did not dare attack. Instead, he received Jonathan with honor, praised him before his friends, and gave him gifts. He said, "Why bring so many troops when there's no war between us? Send them home and take only a few men with you to Ptolemais. I will give that city and other strongholds into your hands." Jonathan believed him. He sent the army back to Judea, keeping only 3,000 men, 2,000 in Galilee, and 1,000 to go with him. But as soon as Jonathan entered Ptolemais, the gates were shut behind him. Tryphon seized him, and all his companions were slain. Then Tryphon sent cavalry and infantry into Galilee and the Great Plain to destroy Jonathan's remaining men. When they heard their leader was captured and killed, they stood together, determined to fight to the death. Seeing their resolve, the enemy withdrew. The survivors returned safely to Judea, mourning deeply for Jonathan and those who had fallen. When the neighboring nations heard that Israel was without a leader, they said, "Now is our chance. Let us wipe them out so that none remember their name." Chapter 13. When Simon heard that Tryphon had gathered an enormous army to invade Judea and destroy it, he saw that the people were terrified. He went up to Jerusalem, assembled them, and spoke words of courage. "You know what my family and I have done for the sake of our laws and the temple. You know the battles we've fought and the suffering we've endured. All my brothers have died defending Israel, and I alone remain. Far be it from me to preserve my life while our nation and our sanctuary are in danger. I will avenge our people, our wives, and our children, for all the nations around us seek our destruction." When the people heard this, their hearts were strengthened. With one voice they said, "You shall be our leader in place of your brothers Judas and Jonathan. Lead us in battle, and we will obey your command." Simon gathered the warriors of Judea and quickly finished rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, fortifying it on every side. He sent Jonathan, the son of Absalom, with a strong force to Joppa, who drove out its inhabitants and secured the city. Meanwhile, Tryphon left Ptolemais with a vast army to invade Judea, still holding Jonathan prisoner. Simon encamped at Edida, facing the open plain. When Tryphon learned that Simon had succeeded his brother and was preparing for battle, he sent messengers saying, "We hold your brother Jonathan only because he owes money to the royal treasury. Send 100 talents of silver and 2 of his sons as hostages, and we will release him." Simon saw through the deception, but sent the silver and boys anyway, fearing that the people would accuse him of causing Jonathan's death by refusing. Yet Tryphon broke his word. He kept both the money and the children, and did not free Jonathan. Soon after, Tryphon attempted to invade Judea by the route toward Adora. But Simon opposed him wherever he went. The garrison in Jerusalem citadel sent word to Tryphon, urging him to hurry through the wilderness and send them supplies. Tryphon prepared his cavalry to ride out by night, but a heavy snowstorm struck, preventing his advance. Frustrated, he withdrew to the land of Gilead, where, near Bascama, he executed Jonathan and buried him there before returning to his own land. When Simon heard, he sent men to retrieve Jonathan's body. They brought his bones to Modin, the city of their fathers, and buried him there. All Israel mourned deeply for many days. Simon built a grand monument over the family tomb, 7 pyramids for his father, mother, and 4 brothers, decorated with fine stonework and carved armor. Around it, he raised tall pillars engraved with ships and weapons as a lasting memorial visible to all who pass by. The monument stood in Modin for generations to come. After this, Tryphon betrayed the young king Antiochus, murdered him, and took the crown for himself, bringing great misery upon the land. Simon continued strengthening Judea, rebuilding fortresses and high-walled cities, setting gates and bars and stocking them with provisions. He sent envoys to King Demetrius asking for tax exemption, explaining that Tryphon had devastated the land. Demetrius responded favorably. King Demetrius, to Simon the high priest, friend of kings, and to the elders and nation of the Jews, greetings. We have received the golden crown and scarlet robe you sent, and we are ready to establish lasting peace with you. The fortresses you have built shall remain yours. All former debts and crown taxes are forgiven, and no tribute shall be collected in Jerusalem. Let those among you who are worthy join our court, and there shall be peace between us. So in the year 170, the yoke of foreign rule was lifted from Israel. From that time onward, documents and contracts were dated in the first year of Simon the high priest, governor, and leader of the Jews. During this time, Simon campaigned against Gaza, surrounding it with his army. He built siege engines, broke down part of the city wall, and captured a tower. The people cried out from the walls with their families, begging for mercy. "Do not punish us for our sins," they pleaded, "but deal with us according to your mercy." Simon relented, granted them peace, expelled the idolaters, cleansed the city, and entered it with songs, instruments, and thanksgiving. He purified it completely, placed faithful men to guard it, made it stronger than before, and built a residence there for himself. The garrison in the Jerusalem citadel was cut off, unable to buy or sell food, and famine struck them severely. Many died of hunger. Finally, they begged Simon for peace, and he granted it. After driving them out, he cleansed the citadel from all defilement and entered it on the 23rd day of the 2nd month in the 171st year. The people rejoiced greatly, carrying palm branches and singing hymns, praising God who had delivered Israel from a great enemy. Simon decreed that this day should be celebrated every year with joy. He further strengthened the temple hill beside the citadel and lived there with his men. When Simon saw that his son John was brave and capable, he appointed him commander of all the forces. John established his base in Gazara, continuing the defense of Israel. Chapter 14. In the year 172, King Demetrius assembled his army and marched into Media, hoping to gain allies against Tryphon. But when Arsaces, the king of Persia and Media, heard of his approach, he sent one of his princes to capture him. The Persian forces defeated Demetrius's army, took him prisoner, and brought him to Arsaces, where he was kept under guard. Meanwhile, the land of Judea enjoyed peace throughout the days of Simon. He ruled with wisdom and sought the good of his people, so his authority was honored and loved. He captured the port of Joppa, opening a way to the islands of the sea, expanded the borders of the nation, recovered lost territories, freed many captives, and fortified cities such as Gazara, Bethsur, and the citadel of Jerusalem, cleansing them from all defilement. None were left who dared oppose him. Under his leadership, the land flourished. Farmers tilled their fields in safety, and the earth yielded its increase. Old men sat together in the streets, speaking of good things, while young men wore splendid armor and trained for the nation's defense. Simon filled the cities with provisions and equipped them with weapons, so that his fame spread far and wide. He brought peace to the land, and Israel rejoiced greatly. No enemy remained to challenge them. Even kings had fallen before them. Simon strengthened those who had been oppressed, rooted out lawlessness, and honored the law of God. He beautified the temple and furnished it with sacred vessels. When news of Jonathan's death reached Rome and Sparta, the people there mourned deeply. But when they heard that Simon had become high priest and ruler of Judea, they sent letters engraved on bronze tablets to renew the friendship and alliance first made with Judas and Jonathan. These were read aloud to the assembly in Jerusalem. The letter from Sparta said, "The rulers and city of Sparta send greetings to Simon the high priest, the elders, priests, and the rest of the Jewish people, our brothers. Your ambassadors have told us of your honor and glory, and we were glad to hear of it. We have recorded your words among the public archives so that our people may remember the friendship between us. A copy has been sent to you." Later, Simon sent Numenius to Rome, carrying a great golden shield weighing 1,000 pounds as a token of friendship and to renew the alliance. When the people heard of it, they said, "What thanks can we give to Simon and his sons? He and his family have strengthened Israel, driven out her enemies, and secured her freedom." So they engraved his deeds on bronze tablets and set them up on Mount Zion. The inscription read, "In the year 172, on the 18th day of the month Elul, in the 3rd year of Simon the high priest, a great assembly of priests, leaders, and elders met at Saramel. They recorded how, during times of war, Simon, the son of Mattathias of the family of Jarib, together with his brothers, risked his life for the law and the sanctuary and brought great honor to the nation. After Jonathan the high priest died, and enemies rose up to destroy the land and seize the temple, Simon took up the cause of his people. He used his own wealth to arm the nation, paid the soldiers their wages, and fortified the cities of Judea. He also fortified Joppa by the sea and Gazara near Azotus, where Gentiles had lived, placing faithful Jews in charge and supplying everything needed for their security. Because of these deeds and his unwavering justice and faithfulness, the people praised Simon. They made him their governor and high priest, for he had strengthened Israel and sought the welfare of his nation above all things. Foreign invaders were expelled, and the citadel in Jerusalem, once a stronghold of their enemies, was taken and purified. Simon placed loyal Jews there and rebuilt the walls of the city. King Demetrius confirmed Simon's position as high priest and made him his friend, honoring him greatly when he heard how the Romans had declared the Jews their allies and treated Simon's envoys with respect. The Jews and priests also decreed that Simon should be their ruler and high priest forever, until a true prophet should arise. He would command the army, oversee the temple and its works, manage the land and fortresses, and be obeyed in all matters. All official documents were to be issued in his name, and he was granted the right to wear purple and gold. No one in the land was allowed to oppose his decisions, hold assemblies without his consent, or wear purple or gold ornaments as he did. Anyone who violated these decrees would be punished. The people all agreed and rejoiced in their decision. Simon accepted the office with humility, becoming high priest, governor, and protector of the Jews and priests. The decree was inscribed on bronze tablets and displayed within the temple precincts, with copies preserved in the treasury as a lasting record for Simon and his descendants. Chapter 15. After these things, King Antiochus, the son of Demetrius, sent letters from the islands of the sea to Simon, the high priest and ruler of the Jews, and to all the people. The letter read, King Antiochus to Simon the high priest and prince of his nation, and to the people of the Jews, greetings. Certain wicked men have seized the kingdom of my fathers. I intend to reclaim it and restore it to its former glory. To this end, I have gathered a great army of foreign soldiers and built a fleet of warships. I will pass through the lands and punish those who have ruined them and laid waste too many cities. Therefore, I now confirm to you all the offerings and privileges granted by the kings before me, and I add to them. You may mint your own coins with your own stamp for your nation. Jerusalem and the sanctuary shall be free. All the fortresses you have built and all the weapons you have forged shall remain in your hands. Any debt owed to the crown is hereby forgiven forever. When I have regained my kingdom, I will honor you, your nation, and your temple with great glory, so that your fame will be known throughout the world. In the year 174, Antiochus marched into the lands of his ancestors. The armies of the kingdom gathered around him, and Tryphon found himself deserted by his men. Pursued by Antiochus, he fled to the coastal city of Dora, where he made his stand. Antiochus surrounded Dora with 120,000 soldiers and 8,000 cavalry. He stationed ships along the coast and attacked the city from both land and sea, allowing no one to go in or out. During this time, Numenius and his delegation returned from Rome, carrying letters addressed to many kings and provinces. The Roman consul Lucius wrote to King Ptolemy, saying, The ambassadors of the Jews, our friends and allies, have come to renew the old friendship and treaty. They were sent by Simon the high priest and the people of the Jews, and they brought with them a golden shield weighing 1,000 pounds. We have received it gladly, and have written to the kings and nations that they must not harm the Jews or their cities, nor assist their enemies in any way. If traitors flee from Judea to you, deliver them to Simon the high priest for punishment, according to their laws. The same message was sent to Demetrius and to the rulers of many lands across the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, King Antiochus continued his siege of Dora. Tryphon was trapped within the city, unable to escape. Simon sent him 2,000 of his best soldiers, along with silver, gold, and much armor to help in the campaign. But Antiochus rejected Simon's gift and broke the agreements they had made before, turning against him. He sent Athenobius, one of his close friends, to Jerusalem with this message: "You hold Joppa, Gazara, and the citadel in Jerusalem, cities that belong to my kingdom. You have laid waste to my lands and taken control of many territories beyond Judea. Therefore, return the cities you have seized and pay 500 talents of silver for the tribute they owe, and another 500 for the damages you have caused. If not, I will come against you in war." When Athenobius came to Jerusalem and saw Simon's grand household, he was amazed. Delivering the king's demand, he waited for Simon's reply. Simon answered, "We have taken no foreign land, nor held what belongs to others. We only reclaim the inheritance of our fathers, which our enemies unlawfully possessed for a time. Now that we have the chance, we have taken back our heritage. As for Joppa and Gazara, though they have harmed our people greatly, we will give you 100 talents for them." Athenobius gave no reply, but left in anger and reported everything to King Antiochus, which kindled the king's fury. In the meantime, Tryphon escaped by ship to Othosius. Antiochus appointed Maccabeus commander of the coastal regions, giving him infantry and cavalry. He ordered him to march into Judea, rebuild the fortress of Kedron, strengthen its gates, and make war upon the people. Maccabeus advanced to Jamnia, raided Judea, took captives, and killed many. Then he fortified Kedron, stationed troops and horsemen there, and from this stronghold launched raids against the roads and towns of Judea, just as the king had commanded. Chapter 16. John, the son of Simon, came up from Gazara and told his father what Maccabeus had done, how he had strengthened the fort at Kedron, gathered troops, and raided the Judean countryside. Simon summoned his 2 eldest sons, Judas and John, and said to them, "My sons, you know that from my youth until now, I and my brothers have fought for Israel. By the help of God, we have often delivered our people. But now I am old, and by God's mercy you are strong and of full age. Take my place and that of your uncles. Go, defend our nation, and may heaven be with you." So he chose 20,000 soldiers and cavalry from the land, and they set out against Maccabeus, camping overnight at Modin. At dawn they advanced into the plain, and saw before them a vast army of footmen and horsemen with a stream between the 2 forces. When John saw that his men hesitated to cross the brook, he went first himself. Seeing his courage, the others followed. He divided his troops, placing the cavalry in the center, for the enemy's horsemen were many. Then the priests sounded the holy trumpets, and the battle began. Maccabeus and his army were routed. Many were slain, and the rest fled into the stronghold. During the fighting, Judas, John's brother, was wounded. But John continued the pursuit as far as Kedron, the fortress Maccabeus had built. The enemy retreated into the towers near Azotus, but John set fire to the place, and about 2,000 of Maccabeus' men perished. Afterward, John returned safely to Judea in peace. In the plains of Jericho, there was a man named Ptolemy, son of Ababus, who had been appointed governor. He possessed great wealth in silver and gold. Pride filled his heart, and he schemed to seize control of the land. Deceitfully, he plotted against Simon and his sons to destroy them. At that time, Simon was touring the cities of Judea, ensuring good governance and order. In the 177th year, during the month of Shebat, he came down to Jericho with his sons, Mattathias and Judas. Ptolemy welcomed them deceitfully into a small fortress called Dock, which he had built. He invited them to a grand banquet, but in secret had stationed armed men nearby. When Simon and his sons had drunk freely, Ptolemy and his men suddenly rose up, seized their weapons, and attacked. They murdered Simon, his 2 sons, and several of his servants, repaying good with treachery. After committing this crime, Ptolemy sent letters to King Antiochus asking for troops to support him, promising to hand over the country and its cities. He also dispatched assassins to Gaza to kill John, and sent letters to the military commanders offering them gold, silver, and rewards if they would side with him. Others he sent to seize Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. But one messenger reached Gaza ahead of the assassins and warned John, saying, "Your father and brothers have been slain, and Ptolemy has sent men to kill you also." John was shocked and grieved, but he quickly captured the would-be assassins and put them to death, for he saw their intent clearly. The rest of John's deeds, his battles, his brave acts, his building of walls, and all that he accomplished, are written in the chronicles of his priesthood from the time he succeeded his father as high priest.